people would be better off without me. This is something that I'm extremely passionate about. I often hear this from individuals who talk about suicide, and I firmly believe it is just not true. I've counseled a lot of people who have lost loved ones to suicide and have never, ever heard anybody state that they were better off now with the person out of their lives. I've worked with many individuals who have had very strained, very complicated, very tumultuous relationships with the person who died, and they were always crushed by that person's death. More suicide deaths happen around the holidays. Actually, the summer months tend to have higher rates of suicide, and it's just important to note this because there's no particular time that it's good to be more aware about suicide. It's always good to be aware of suicide. There are two types of people, those who talk about it and never will, and those who don't talk about it and just do it. And this is absolutely false. The difference between the two groups is much more about access to lethal means and lethal methods than it is about intent. And the name of this presentation was The Bridge Between Suicide and Addiction, and this is why. All right, so I'm going to talk a little about the Golden Gate Bridge. The Golden Gate Bridge is an iconic and beautiful American landmark, but is also a very deadly sight. It is estimated that about 2,000, since it was built, about 2,000 deaths have happened from people jumping off the San Francisco Bay Bridge since its construction in 1937. It is a very lethal means of dying. Those who jump, only about 2% survive the fall. And almost all of those people talk about the ambivalence right after they jumped. And here's a quote from a gentleman named Ken Baldwin. He jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge in 1985 and recovered, found his calling, and has been teaching high school now for 20 years. But the quote is, "I instantly realized that everything in my life that I thought was unfixable was totally fixable, except for having just jumped." Okay, since the 1940s, advocacy groups have been trying to put up a suicide barrier, making it more difficult to jump from this bridge. This is not an unfamiliar or radical notion. Other major attractions like the Alpha Tower, the Empire State Building, they have suicide barriers around them. After 70 years of suicide prevention advocates finally were granted permission to be able to put up a suicide barrier around the San Francisco Bay Bridge. However, it looks like toll money will not be able to go towards this project, making it much more difficult to fund the project. The board did, however, allow for a median to be built on the bridge using toll dollars. Despite